Welcome to episode 53 of the Necronama.com. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now, and I think we're going to have to kill my stepdad.
And I am Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, and survivor of whatever apocalypse we're going through right now.
Which is impressive. Joining us today is Doug Murano, who I'm meeting for the first time. I'm pretty excited about it. How are you doing, Doug?
I'm doing great. Can I let the cat out of the bag? I mean,
okay, I suppose.
James and I have known each other for a long time, so this is kind of cool and surreal for me. I'm really happy to be talking to you again.
Yeah, in all seriousness, we went to college together, and you're one of the reasons I kept writing. And I know I've told you thank you 1,000 times, but thank you anyway. I literally hit Doug up to be on this show before our first episode. And now here he is on episode 53. We finally made it work.
He wouldn't leave me alone. No, it's awesome. I'm super happy to be here, and you've got a great thing going, and I'm really impressed with what you've got going, and for the niche you've carved out for yourself in the horror business. It's been really cool to see your career grow as I've tried to make mine. So yeah, high five, man.
Absolutely. Tell everybody else about you and all of your books.
Every time I do this, I feel like Troy McClure from The Simpsons. You may remember me from such books as. But I'm Doug Murano. I'm an editor and anthologist, and you may know me from such books as Behold, Oddities, Curiosities, and Undefinable Wonders, Gutted, Beautiful Horror Stories, co-edited with D. Alexander Ward, and my latest, co-edited with Michael Bailey, is Miscreations, Gods, Monstrosities, and Other Horrors.
And I believe that Behold won some kind of award, didn't it?
Yeah, it was a Bram Stoker Award winner. It really floored me back in 2018. It did. So I was very, very pleased and thrilled, and as surprised as anybody in the whole world that it pulled down that award.
I mean, Behold is just a great book. It's got one of my favorite short stories ever, and the whole thing is just fantastic. What I really like about Behold is, you kind of have it's Oddities, Curiosities, and Undefinable Wonders. Is that the right order?
That's right, yeah.
Okay. So you have these three sections that kind of hit each one of these things, but it is such a masterful way of stories working together. And I know that's the goal when you make an anthology, but let's face it, a lot of anthologies don't pull it off. Or if they do, it's a loose connection. Like somebody making films and claiming that it's a trilogy because there's an ice cream cone in each one. But so
easy now. Don't you blaspheme.
I couldn't resist. It was right there. But no, Behold holds a special place in my heart as a reader because these stories worked so well together. And Don can tell you straight out, the night of the Stokers, I was overjoyed. So I'm so happy.
Man, thank you. That means a lot to me. Thank you. It's very kind of you to say. And
he's really underselling it because he was sitting there like, holy shit, Doug won. Oh my God. Holy shit. This is fucking awesome.
I can finally admit that I know him. No.
I finally made you proud, James.
With that said, I love anthologies in general. And so my question for you is basically, why did you decide to go with anthologies? Is there a certain joy that comes from editing that's different than writing or being published in that traditional sense? Because I know you've done both.
Oh my God. Are you ready for a bit of a long story?
Sure.
Okay. So the short version of why is, you're right. I'd been writing and publishing short fiction for a few years. By the time I got into anthologies, I started in about 2008. And probably had about a dozen short stories under my belt. And then then my children started to come into the world, and I realized that just lack of sleep and attention, and just at a time in my life where productivity on the fiction front was just really, really hard. And so I had slowed down, and I never really thought about quitting, but just wasn't really sure how to make it work. And then out of the blue, a guy by the name of D. Alexander Ward, I've mentioned him before, I co-edited Gutted with him later, came out of the woodwork. I had never talked to the man before. And he said, "Hey, I saw some of your short fiction. I like your style. Why don't we try to do an anthology together?" And he had this idea for Shadows over Mayberry. And it was going to be Lovecraft versus literally like Andy Griffith and Don Knotts, which was crazy, but it was like awesome crazy, you know? Like, so
I'm sold. I want to see it.
You know, it felt like something that, you know, it was just the right kind of crazy. So it got my attention, and but ultimately I thought, like, I don't really have any experience. I'd been a slush reader for a couple of genre periodicals, so I had some experience reading, and you know, I have a background in creative writing academically, but I just didn't feel like I had the tools to do it and do it right. I didn't have any money, didn't really have any contacts, and didn't really know the first thing about putting a book together. So originally, I think, I don't know whether I actually did or I was going to tell him no. And I talked it over with my wife. And, you know, it feels a little grandiose to say this, but I compare it almost to that old, like, I don't even know if it's true, but apparently Tabitha King rescued the manuscript of Carrie out of the trash bin that Stephen King had started and just hated, and he threw it out. Well, my wife kind of did the same thing for me, because I said, you know, this guy, D. Alexander Ward, I don't really know him. He's got this idea and he wants to do it, but I just don't really think it's the right time. And she basically told me, she's like, well, you should do it. No one's really beaten down your door for anything else. And it sounds like you could have a lot of fun with this. And so I thought, well, what the hell? And so really it was for that reason, that conversation, that I said, well, I'll give it a try. Let's ask some more questions. Ultimately, with the idea that intellectual property being what it is, and, you know, just the idea of Shadows over Mayberry being a very niche product, I made the suggestion to make it, to broaden the scope of it and say, well, how about we take the grain of your idea, D, and make it small town America in general collides with Lovecraftian horror from the cosmos. And that's what became Shadows over Main Street. And so, yeah, that's what started me off on this path. It's really Dee's fault. And his idea for what became Shadows over Main Street. So we both kind of added our own little ingredients, and then we still had the problems of, you know, no money, very few contacts in the business, no real way forward. But at the same time, and this is kind of where the story gets long, but at the same time, I was the volunteer communications coordinator for the Horror Writers Association. And there were two tracks that kind of ended up colliding, because I had asked to do this interview series of Bram Stoker Award nominees called Noah Nominee right around that time, to sort of help promote the nominees' stories and books in a blog series leading up to the ceremony. And so what I realized about halfway through doing this was I was getting to know and be in contact with just a ton of really talented authors. And so I also realized that I probably would not have to cold call people, because I had been in contact with them for this interview series. And so part of my interview list ended up to be the invite list for Shadows over Main Street. It was one of those things that just sort of worked out really well. And then I don't know how we did it, but we ended up getting Ramsey Campbell to write the foreword for it. And we ended up pulling down Josh Mallerman's first short story that he ever published was in that book. And so it's just like a bunch of crazy good timing and luck, and us stumbling in the dark for that first one. I think everybody has a learning curve, but holy cow, like we fell bass backwards into it. I don't know that I could do it again because we truly didn't know better at that point. And we're very lucky that it worked out the way that it did.
Wow. Huh. I didn't know any of that. And I've interviewed you about the book before, so that's fascinating.
Yeah, and the other cool thing is a Fiddlehead Party on Carpenter's Farm became the seed. I don't know whether you heard about Josh's serial novel that he published for free this year, Carpenter's Farm. Well, Carpenter's Farm first appeared in Shadows Over Main Street in his first short story that was ever published, A Fiddlehead Party on Carpenter's Farm.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so it was kind of cool to come back to the farm and revisit in some ways a little bit of that history, and yeah, it was neat.
And for anybody who looks up Mallerman's new free book, also look at the other stuff, because a lot of creators went through and made stuff. I know some people made music based off what he was writing. One of our good friends, Shane Keene, did a lot of poetry that was really cool. And it was just neat how Josh let it like this collaborative thing and just how it kept growing. I think that's so cool and so symbolic of what this community can be.
Absolutely. And Josh is one of the biggest champions for the horror community. And it didn't surprise me at all that he would do something like that. He's just got an infectious energy and a let's do it attitude. And that's how he's been from day one that I've known him. So yeah, it's a stupendous effort and really impressive. It's not like he had this in the trunk. You know, he was writing and polishing as he was going on this thing. So it was it was performance art in a variety of different ways.
Yeah, it was really neat to watch as it happened. I'm sure it's still great to just pick it up and read it now, but it was so interesting to see it like dropping each day, or you know, I don't know. I've just never seen anything like it. I thought it was such a cool concept. So
yeah. And I'm trying to think of the other parts of your question. What do I like about being an anthologist? Was that part of it?
I guess it's just basically like, is there a different sort of joy between writing a short story or publishing versus like you've had Clive Barker's stuff in your hands and you're editing it, or you've had Mallerman's stuff and you're probably making suggestions. Like that's gotta be a cool collaborative thing as well, right? So like, I guess my question really is there a distinct different feeling between them, and are you able to describe it?
Yeah. It's definitely a lot different. I think I'm ultimately more comfortable as an editor. I think I've got more a coaching personality. I think I get that from my dad. And I don't know, man. What I'm realizing is that being in the position that I'm in is like having a front row seat in a master class and watching the genre grow right in front of you, and being able to see brand new stuff that might not be polished from some of the best horror authors who have ever lived, some of the best horror authors who are working right now. And to be able to have a part in like writing that verse of the song is an incredible thrill. And there's really just nothing like it. It's like watching real magic happen. And I don't know if I have good vocabulary for this. It's I'm trying to, you know, for Clive Barker and Neil Gaiman, those were reprints, but Clive was pretty open to editorial suggestions, even on the stories that had appeared elsewhere. And so the versions that you see in my books they're not substantially different, but they've got tweaks to them that I've been able to put in. And it's sort of like, I always felt like somebody asked me to rehang the Mona Lisa, but first I had to dip my hands in like caramel and sprinkles first, and then try to put it back up on the wall without totally screwing it up. And so that's what that experience was kind of like. But it was a tremendous privilege and an honor, and just a thrill just to be able to have that work represented in the book, but then to also have that fortifying experience as an editor that says, yes, I can do this. I can do this at the highest level. And it's something that I take with me into every professional situation I'm in now.
That's cool. Well, I suppose we should jump into the film. So when you agreed to come on the show, you picked Shaun of the Dead like almost right away. And so my question, as always, is why did you pick this film? But in this particular situation, it must have been pretty important to you because it was a fast decision. And a lot of our guests spend a lot of time thinking about it. So I'm very interested in your answer on this one of why this was the one.
Well, I wanted to do this one because the movie came into my life at a very formative time. I was just getting out of undergrad, going into grad school. My life was a mess. I related with Shaun on quite a different number of levels. Just that idea where, you just can't get it together. It was sort of like my put it on anytime movie and feel better. And, it kind of reminded me of our time together. That was when we would go to class together and when we knew each other a little bit better. So it seemed to kind of like there was a nostalgia to it as well. But, the zombie genre has always been rife with social commentary. Think about George A. Romero's movies,
yep.
Racism, consumerism, income inequality. All of it has been rolled up into his zombie films, and Shaun of the Dead continues on in that tradition in a lot of different ways. And so social commentary being the focus of this podcast, I thought, well, that really, really makes sense. Now, the thing I didn't expect is between the time that I chose this film and now that it would take on an extra resonance because of the pandemic. And,
oh, yeah.
Who would have thought that a movie in 2004 could be prophetic, where like a bunch of fools go to the bar when they should just stay home, right? Like people are dropping dead from sea to shining sea, and like the best thing that people can figure out to do is to go out again. So I don't know. I watched it just the other day again to kind of get ready for this, and it occurred to me that good films like Shaun of the Dead have that evergreen quality where, you're going to see different facets of it depending on what's going on in the world.
Absolutely. No, that's a great answer.
That the idea of survival is interesting to me. There's that running joke throughout the whole film that when somebody asks him how he's doing, he says, surviving. And it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but if you look at the film in totality, the modern world, and this was even before like smartphones, like Ed had like this little brick Nokia, so this is even before Facebook and Instagram and Twitter was blowing up your pocket every 5 seconds. But even in 2004, before social media, the world that's presented around Shaun is overwhelming. And you see that like represented, I think, in those extreme action close-ups of him brushing his teeth or making toast or going to the bathroom. Like you can laugh it off as, it's a parody of action films. But I think it's also saying something about, even without zombies, this world it's tough to get by.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the problem that he has in perceiving the zombie apocalypse to begin with, is there's just this flood of information, this flood of stimulation. And I don't know if you remember when he wakes up from his hangover and he goes across the street to the store and he's like, it's played for laughs, but I don't know. I find it to be almost sad. Like he just got dumped by his girlfriend. His job sucks. His roommate sucks. And he's just like up to his ears in stimulation. He doesn't see the bloody handprint on the window. Right. He slips in blood on the floor and like just opens his soda and walks out. So I don't know. I think it, again, in some ways, this movie was a bit ahead of its time. I often wonder what it would be like if a film like this was made, if Shaun of the Dead was remade in the age of social media, how that would be different.
I mean, I actually think that it would lose a bit. Like you wouldn't have the joy of how his good friend is supposed to take messages and give them to him, and how that leads to chaos. But you also, like, you'd be able to, like, look things up. Like, is it safe to go to the Winchester? They reach that final wall, and he looks over while he's standing on the slide, and they're like, is it clear? Like, he would have been able to, there's probably an app, like, see where the zombies are or some shit. Who knows, So, I mean, in that way, I think you'd lose some stuff. So I'm actually glad that it came out when it did.
Well, yeah, I don't know, James, there's a possibility, because you see that when they do go looking for information, they can't find anything through the television. So let's just say that, or even when he's trying to call emergency services, he can't get through because it's flooded. Imagine if all this shit is going down and the internet is down. Like, you're not going to be able to get those answers. I mean, so it's very doable.
That's true. Yeah.
But I think that the biggest problem would not be the access to information, it would be the access to misinformation and disinformation, because you see how things are now with the pandemic, and even with the protests. Like, I have people who are convinced, like, oh, there's still riots going on. I'm like, the riots stopped 2 weeks ago. People are just protesting.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, well, I hear there's going to be looting. I'm like, and I realized the other day what it is it's because Fox News keeps reporting on the riots from 2 weeks ago and showing videos from 2 weeks ago to scare the shit out of these old people who watch their channel. But yeah, the misinformation that's possibly out there, or at least the access to it, could lead to a whole nother slew of problems. Like, hey, this is just a disease that was bioengineered by the Chinese against us. Or my favorite, a guy ate a bat. I'm like, no, that video was from 3 years ago and it was somewhere else.
Right. And you see, not just the misinformation, but this irrational skepticism to good information. And you actually see seeds of that in Ed. Remember when they're figuring out whether they're going to go get Barbara, and they're watching TV, and the anchor's like, stay in your homes, do not attempt to go reach loved ones. And Ed turns to Shaun and he goes, do you believe everything you see on TV?
Right.
And then they're like, so I figure that Ed would be like a Reddit troll or something, like he would be one of those people just like sharing these crazy conspiracy memes. I think that's the logical conclusion of his character.
Well, and that's why Ed has the ending he has.
It's not so bad. He kind of gets what he wants, right?
That's true. You could argue he hasn't changed that much.
Right. Yeah, he kind of has to stay the same.
But yeah, as you're saying it, I do think you also get some cool scenes. Like if you had a phone, for instance, and you're trying to hide from the zombies, and then your phone goes nuts because you get a tweet or some shit, or some automated email from somebody trying to sell something, and then the zombies know where you are.
Right. And then, the one thing that I would mourn the loss of the most is that excellent gag where Shaun is wrestling with that first zombie, Mary, and he's got his disposable camera out, and you just hear this click, click, click as he's winding the next. It's just something that you would, he'd have his cell phone out at that point, but there's just nothing quite as funny as that clicking sound that you see.
Yeah.
Or that you.
Definitely. Don, do you have anything else on survival?
No, nothing for right now. We can come back to it because I've got a couple that deal with that later on.
All right, cool. I don't have anything.
Okay. So one of the things that interests me, and maybe I'm thinking about this too deeply, is that it's sort of like this. I'm gonna take a phrase that I learned back in grad school, Bildungsroman, where he becomes the man that he should be, or he needs to be in some ways, but he's got to destroy bits of himself along the way. And this idea that he's got to destroy his record collection. That's the first thing that goes. He's got to destroy his stepfather. He's got to destroy his mother. He's got to destroy his best friend. You know, there seems to be a theme of destruction as a creative act in this film. I don't know if you guys pick up on that.
Well, yeah, and I would even add he has to stand up to the guy that he thinks is in love with the girl he's in love with.
Yeah.
That's not an easy thing to do at all, especially somebody you see all the time. You know? So, I mean, even that, like, I really view this as Shaun going from somebody who doesn't seem to ever stand up to anybody to having to stand up to literally everyone, whether they're alive or not.
Right.
And, I mean, that's incredible growth. So, yeah.
Well, Philip says right before he dies, you know, there comes a time when you've got to be a man. And this, I think the film asks the question, what does it mean? What does it mean? Does it mean to leave childish things behind?
Yeah. Wow.
Well, there's also that idea of within a society, what comes with that, not just what you give up, but what comes with that. Is it having the job or not even a job, having a career and taking care of a family and all those things? Or can it be, you know, what Ed is which, you know, I hate to say this, but even though Ed's a bum, like, he's really free as far as what he can and can't. Like, he has no fucking worries at all, except, you know, getting to the next level on PlayStation 2, whichever game he was playing. But when Shaun has that conversation with one of his coworkers, you know, he says, well, thanks a lot, Granddad. He's like, Granddad, it's like, I'm 29. How old are you? Like 19? So I'm 17. It's like, look, I get it. You think I want to be here for the rest of my life? And that, for anybody who's at that quarter life crisis between 25 and 30, hits very hard, because you're still trying to figure out what the hell you want in your life. And there are all those societal pressures as far as what you should and you shouldn't be doing. And, you know, some people get stuck into that, I guess, the mundanity of that part of life where, you know, this is the best it's going to be for me. Let me just deal with this. Or, you know, what else am I missing? Is there something else out there for me that I should be doing to become a better person? Which, you know, by the end of the movie, I have problems with Shaun's growth, because I feel like Shaun's dead.
Go on.
Okay.
Yeah. Tell us.
I don't mean like it's a weird, like, oh, he's the one who's really, you know.
Is he the Walking Dead?
No. Ed doesn't change except for his form, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, he's out in the utility shed, like, playing video games for the rest of his undead life, right? But it seems like Shaun gives up so much to be with his, I guess at this point, his ex, to where they get back together. It's like everything in his life changed. I mean, I'm sure he has a better job at the end of the film, but it seems like he's not him. And I have a real big problem with people trying to change their partners and relationships to suit whatever their goals are or whatever their view of what their partner should be, as opposed to, hey, here's some personal growth. Here's some ideas of how to make yourself better for you, as opposed to, here are all the problems I have with you. This is what you need to change, or else we're not going to be together. So it just, for me, I had real problems with it in you know, watching it. I think the fourth or fifth time I watched it, I still wanted her to die. Like,
so it's a downbeat ending for you.
For me, it is, except for the friendship, because he still has Ed. He didn't lose Ed. He loses his mom. He loses Philip, his stepdad, which he kind of, you know, at one point he even calls him dad. He loses those people, but he still has Ed. And I have problems with, you know, at the end, they do go back to what Shaun had warned and said, oh, you know, I'm sorry, not Shaun. Shaun had been warned about, you know, we're going to be one of these couples that sits around and basically goes to the same places every night. And, you know, there's nothing exciting about our lives. And they get to the end, and that's exactly who they are. So it's like, you complained to him about who he was, and now it's kind of like, you accept him for who he is, even though you wanted to change all these things about him. And for me, I just look at him and I think, I think Sean's still dead inside, or Sean is dead inside now.
Huh.
So you extrapolate from the end of the movie, and Sean starts to spend more and more time out in the shed. Pretty soon he's spending nights out in the shed. He's not coming back in.
Well, he even says, "Hey, I'm going to go out in the garden for a bit," and he mutters, I think he says like 2 seconds or 2 minutes or something. I guarantee you, as somebody who games and he's sitting out there and he's like, all right, fuck it. It's 5:00. I got until about 6:30 that we can play. Then I need to take a shower because we're going to eat at 7. Okay. As long as I get out of here by 6:35, and then it's going to get to that point where he's going to not necessarily passive aggressively, but he's going to get to a point with her to where, like I did with my mom with Sunday morning in church, as long as I can make it till 6:55, where she doesn't know anything, I have the excuse of, well, shit, we're not going to make it in time, Mom. So there were a good number of Sunday mornings where I just stayed as quiet as possible, hoping that she would forget what our plans were for that Sunday. So around 7:10, 7:15, she was like, oh, it's going to be too late. We're not going to, well, we'll go to church next week. And I'm sitting there like, yeah, no, we're not, Mom.
Well, and there is a tension between Ed and Sean and Liz. There's a bit of a homoerotic current there, from the moment they're having that first conversation in the Winchester where Ed is with them on the date, and Sean and Ed flirt several times playfully throughout the film. And so I think it's kind of asking that question about, not necessarily literal homosexual love, but like, what does love between men look like, and what role can that play in our lives, or what role should it play?
Yeah, because even later at the Winchester, Ed goes and gets him his beer, and my wife, this is the first time she had viewed the film, and I'm trying to stop with oh man, you need to watch this part. Oh, this part is really good. Oh, this part is really deep. But the part where everyone's arguing inside the Winchester, and Ed has gone behind the bar to he makes a pint for Sean first and tells him like, hey, it's a little warm because the coolers are off. I hope you like it. And in the midst of all this chaos, it's kind of like, you're my best friend. You're the guy I love. We've known each other for all these years. I know how you are. And damn it, I know how you like your beer.
Yep. And Sean looks at him and says, thanks, babe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's an argument to be made that Ed is exactly what Sean needs. If you're coming at it from your perspective, Don, and retaining who Sean is, who knows him the best? Well, that's Ed.
Well, and Ed also wants the same things that he wants. Like, if you take romantic love, sex, all that stuff out of it, Ed is his soulmate.
Yeah.
Ed is the guy who has the same goals. Like maybe they're not goals that work for me, but that doesn't matter, But like they click on this. They want the same things. And I mean, I can kind of see how Sean might have been a lot happier if he would have just let this go.
He would have avoided slaughtering everyone he loves.
Right.
That would have been one thing.
There's that, sure, but
on that front, he's kind of a failure. Like, yeah, he becomes a big boy at the end, but holy cow, like, bodies in his wake, right?
Yeah, what a price. Well, and even like that part where he's outside of the Winchester and he's trying to tell them there's a back door, and nobody listens to him except Ed. Like, Ed's at least looking at him and listening. Everyone else is doing their own shit, not even paying attention to him. So, like, I think that all these little tiny cues, like, really kind of put things into that's where he would have been happier and he would have been okay. And one might even argue that if the two of them had made it to the Winchester alone and been eaten by zombies, they'd be okay with it because they went together.
That's right. Yeah. Doing what they loved.
Yeah.
Yeah. If they'd been eaten on that night, where they were commiserating over the breakup. That would have been like peak Shaun and Ed.
Right.
I would like to see, as long as we're just all over anyway, spoilers. So when Ed gets bit and they're going to take the elevator to leave, I would have liked to see more of her pulling Shaun on and her being the one to make them leave. I would have liked to see Shaun fight more to stay with Ed.
Yeah, but I think by then, I think from a character standpoint, doesn't work. From a story arc perspective, yeah. Sure. I mean, he kind of has to at that point because he's reached this next zenith where, he's transitioned from being a boy to having at least the trappings of a grown-up heterosexual male existence.
Yep.
But I was disappointed too. I mean, it's hard not to love Ed.
So, Don, under your theory, does this whole thing end with Shaun one day just leaning into Ed's lap, hey, buddy, bite me in the neck? Is that how he's going out?
No, because I think he would still want that option of being free. I mean, as far as if Liz dies before he does, there's still that option of, you know what? There are more fish in the sea, which is, kind of what Ed was trying to teach him when they went out drinking and dancing to electro that night of the breakup. It was kind of fuck her. Who cares?
Now, let me just point out, I don't think Liz is in any way out of line with what she wants.
No. It's just that they're two different people, so
exactly.
It's kind of
they just don't belong together. Yeah. I think she is well within reason to want that in a relationship. Right. I just don't think Shaun is capable of ever giving it to her.
Yeah. I would definitely agree with that.
Speaking of the end, this was another theory I had about the end. I think at the end, Liz kind of gives up because, a significant portion of her, and we don't know, there might even be more members of her family who were struck, killed, whatever. But it's interesting to think about how she may have stayed with Shaun, not just because he's the guy who saved her, but holy shit. Do I really want to go back out there into the dating world? I know this guy. We've been through all this stuff. You know what? Screw it. I'll stay with him. He did save my life. He knows a good bit about me. I know if something goes down, he can help me out. Plus, hey, this apartment's free now.
Right.
Could you imagine the housing prices after something like this takes place?
I mean, I keep joking about it with COVID, so it's crazy.
Yeah, I was kind of hard on people who choose to still go out and socialize and pack bars, but I think Shaun of the Dead also hits on something that's very true about human nature. Our wants and needs are pretty simple. The criteria for going to the Winchester is it's safe, it's familiar, and we can smoke there.
Right.
And I think it really comes down to that for a lot of people. Right or wrong, they want to be comfortable, right? And so yeah, I can rag on Shaun and Ed for going there, and I can rag on people for being, in my view, irresponsible, but it's kind of human nature, isn't it?
Definitely.
It's like what gets discussed, I guess more so in disaster films than anything else. But that idea of, if I'm going to die, it's going to be on my terms. Or, the question that we always ask, if you were going to die, in a week, what would you do? I'd want to go live my life. So I guess not a good number of people are looking at this not as a hoax or any overreaction. They're just looking at it as, well, some of us are going to die. I might be one of them, and I don't want to die in my house by myself. and not enjoying the last days I might have if I end up getting the disease, which I can understand, but I also have to, I'm going to point out the irresponsibility of there are a significant number of people that you could get sick if you happen to be sick. So,
right. Sort of like that moment, I think, in Lethal Weapon 2 where Riggs is shot to hell and like he just wants that last cigarette,
Yeah.
Feel like a lot of people are feeling like that. There was something that that we keyed in on earlier, and I think it has to do with what Don said about that they kind of only go to the same places and do the same things. And at one point, Liz says, "I want to do interesting stuff, and I want you to want to do it too."
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to ask, and I think maybe we've covered it a little bit, but in my mind, there was at least a little bit of hope that they were there. Or, I guess you could read it. The zombie apocalypse might be the most interesting thing ever to happen to them. And so maybe they don't want to be living interesting lives anymore. I mean, where are you guys at on that?
Well, considering that you can watch the zombies on TV, with the zombie race, I'm going to come back to this, but I like how at the end of the film they show how they make use of the zombies as opposed to all the other movies. It's like, hey, zombie, let's kill them, let's burn them, let's shoot them in the head, let's do all this other stuff. In this film, it shows kind of what we would do with zombies of, hey, let's use them for entertainment. But I do think that because how the hell are you going to top like an apocalyptic night where you're fighting for your life with a dinner at a fancy fish restaurant?
So maybe
you're not going to be able to.
Maybe the only logical solution then is a life of numb resignation after that. Like it worked out for Frodo at the end of Lord of the Rings. Like once he went to Mount Doom, it was over for him, right? Like,
yeah,
he was spent.
I fall on a slightly different level with this. I think that it's just really true to life. Like, I don't know about you guys, but like relationships I've had, it always starts with I want to do the interesting stuff. I want to do this big thing. And the true comfort comes from the sitting at home together quietly or doing really mundane shit together. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you still want something interesting occasionally, but I think that like they're not at the Winchester, like they're doing the same thing they probably do all the time, but they're at home. They're in a space that's comfortable, I assume, for both of them versus something he wants to do or something she wants to do. So I think that it's really true to life for my relationships at the very least.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that come out in quarantine where everybody and their dog is like baking bread now. Like we want to do those when we are in a world where we're completely overwhelmed. We want to Netflix and chill and bake bread. That's what we want to do.
Well, and I think we also realized that none of us have a lot of skills that are going to help us survive. So now we're trying to learn some.
Yeah,
see, James, I told you need me during the purge.
Your ability to retweet is not helpful.
Somebody said that all post-apocalyptic fiction is going to have to be reevaluated for toilet paper shortages. Now that we know, right? We know what happens.
Which, makes me think of something. As far as this movie was done in 2004, it's a post 9/11 film. So, you had a bunch of, chest thumping, war themed movies that came out after this, or terrorist related films. Like I remember Swordfish had when it came out on video, they had to have the sticker to warn people of what was there. What was portrayed in the film, and then Black Hawk Down was pushed up like 6 months for its release. So, and there were a good number of like comedies and things like the escapist stuff. This film, with terrorism, or at least real life terrorism, natural disasters, all these things, the zombie apocalypses themselves, they're all disasters that people think that, well, not the zombie apocalypse, obviously, but disasters that people started become adjusted to and start thinking about, because I think in 2005 you had Hurricane Katrina, and how you would survive in these situations. No one predicted that we would be running for toilet paper to combat a virus. Or in some cases, I'm going to show up at my Capitol building with guns to say, like, we need to fight the corona. Like, a bullet's not going to stop the coronavirus. But I kind of question, like, what would people have been doing to prep for the zombies that are coming? Because Liz and her roommates, her flatmates, are all just, we're just going to stay in here and wait it out. There seems to be... I wanted to see exactly what would work for them. Like, oh, shit, zombies are walking down the street. Let me go ahead and raid this store and get a bunch of food and go hide in my apartment or do something like that. Because you never really see it. It's just when people are out, it's the zombies are either attacking them or it's just a group of zombies just meandering around looking for the next person to target.
Right. I think what we're hitting on is the sort of British essence of this thing where everybody is polite and well-intentioned. And, that's the other thing that's interesting to me about this is that not only that, but the handling of firearms in this film. If this was an American film, like probably more than one of the characters would know how to use a firearm. But since it's a British film, and gun culture isn't nearly as pervasive over there, the firearm at the Winchester is sort of like this mythical thing. They don't even know if it works, and they only really know how to work it by virtue of what they've learned through video games. So I think there's a little bit of, imagine if it's hard to imagine this same scenario playing out in an American film.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I was sort of paying attention to how it's not the same as American, and the gun thing was the number one thing that stuck out to me. But also, I feel like when American films make zombie movies, there's always a fight over who's in charge.
Right.
Whether it's Rick or the governor, whether it's even people on the same team, like there's always this fight for control, and that doesn't exist in this. Everybody just kind of, it exists in one scene, but even then, it's like we had to get to a certain breaking point in order for that scene to hit when David wants control. But other than that, everybody pretty much just accepts Sean's doing this, we're going with Sean. And I thought that was really interesting because it's almost like we have this built-in trope or cliche we have to do where at some point our team's going to break up and go in separate ways because they're disagreeing. And I don't know, that just really stuck out to me.
Yeah, it's like instead of an aggressive showdown between Sean and David, it's like totally passive aggressive.
Yeah.
They're David is assaulting him with half truths and biting remarks.
This is the most British description ever.
Yeah, as you were saying this, I was thinking about how this would be done in other countries. Like you talk about the I guess the deference that the British give, but what if this were Canadian? Because you do have the guns in Canada. But you also have, at least from my dealing with Canadians, you have that politeness that goes along with it. So would there be this moment where you're shooting a zombie and saying sorry at the same time? Or, it's
more denim? I don't know.
Man. Good Lord. Sorry. No, I do think that it would be fascinating to see how different countries deal with it. We did Train to Busan a while back, and there's a little bit of a back and forth over kind of who's in charge, but their goals are the same. It's again, not a break between them. It's no, we have to do this, So I don't know if that's a cultural thing and an American thing, but it feels like it is. It feels like we have to have this division in every zombie thing that we make.
And it's also kind of a different idea of masculinity too, right? It's like, who gets to be the alpha male, if there is such a thing? Mm-hmm. And we can probably lump that into the whole idea of toxic masculinity, where there's got to be some white knight in shining armor that has all the answers, and he shall not be questioned once he's been anointed.
Well, Pete, if he had stayed around long enough, I mean, Pete probably would have been seen as an alpha male because, or at least the leader, because he's this 6'4", seemingly tough guy. But I mean, he gets eliminated early on because he gets bitten, and they go to check on him, and turns out he's a zombie because, Ed left the door open again, and the zombies got in the house. But yeah, I like the fact that it's a group that's familiar with each other, and even when Yvonne, the friend that Shaun runs into earlier, when I guess the outbreak is taking place, but no one knows what the hell is going on. When she runs into him, and then she comes back, she's formed her own group. So you even get that idea of like, this is not a male's, masculinity does not equate to leadership, or leadership is not the default setting, right. Because she's leading her group to safety, and she comes back with the British Marines to go kick some ass. And even when she shows up to save Liz and Shaun, it's kind of like, hey, we're here to come save you, and we're going to get you on these trucks and get you out of here. And which was great because Shaun is the perceived hero of his group, but he never looks at it as, I need to save it, because he's dealing with the trauma of losing all these people along the way. And as you said earlier, it was about surviving for him. It was about making sure these other people got through, to the point where he was so so conflicted about shooting his own mother when she clearly had been bitten, and he knew what it meant.
Yeah.
And we need to survive. We need to survive. We need to survive. He knows that she's there. He doesn't want to kill her before she's turned. He doesn't want to kill her at all, but once she's turned, he's like, fuck it. I gotta save everybody. I hate to do this. I hate to do this to my mom. He even had reservations about doing it to Philip. So, definitely he's going to have some problems with doing it to his own mom.
Well, and when his friend, remind me of her name again, please. The one who actually does the right thing.
Oh gosh, was it Diana?
We'll call her Diana. When she comes back at the end and she says, how many are left? And like, she realizes that it's just Shaun and Liz. There's this little look that she gives where it's like, it's this look, it's this moment where she could have said a lot of things,
right? But
she just kind of takes a deep breath and says, well, let's get you off to the truck.
Yeah. And that was Yvonne.
Yeah. Yep. And, that to me was really telling too, because she has shown leadership throughout, all of her scenes. And then the final thing she does, she takes mercy on Shaun, because she could have said, what did you do? Yeah. Like, you got all these people killed. But she shows him kindness and mercy at the end, which, again, leadership traits.
So 2 things really fast. Number 1, I would have listened to Pete for a whole different reason, and that's because he was the voice of Darth Maul in episode 1, and I would follow Darth Maul anywhere. But 2, I was thinking about the fact that the only time Shaun has a plan, the entire time, like a real plan, is when he and Ed are talking about how to go kill his stepfather. So the only time that he has a plan, number 1, doesn't work out correctly. But number 2, it's because him and his friend are throwing ideas back and forth. And that's the time that he's able to make a plan. And I think that there's something there as well.
So more evidence that he needs Ed in his life.
Yeah.
He's at his best when he needs Ed. I've got to take a small aside here. it breaks my heart that Pete dies in the shower. Like, you know that he got up for work that morning thinking he was going to go in,
Right.
feeling awful. And he dies on his feet in the shower, probably scrubbing that damn bite out.
Yeah. Wow. That's sad. Holy
I
shit.
know. I don't mean to harsh the buzz here, but like I was watching rewatching the film again, and as an older guy than I was when I first saw it, Pete just breaks my heart. Like, I see him as the jerk he's supposed to be, but I also kind of see every working man's future in that, right? Like, It wears you down, and it happened to Pete really fast, to the point where he didn't stay in bed. He didn't call in sick. He was dying of an infection, and he got up and he got in the shower so he could go to work after getting like 2 hours of sleep thanks to Sean and Ed.
Wow. And I'll bring it down further. Like, how many people with COVID symptoms have gone through this sort of thing?
Mm-hmm.
They're sick. They might know they're sick, they might not, but they still have to go to work because of how our society works. That's fucking terrifying and so sad. It is. And Pete was wearing a suit, but he still was in a position where he had to rent a house with 2 other guys. So I'm guessing he had to go to work. He definitely had to.
Yeah.
He had to, because he couldn't throw Sean out because his friend wouldn't leave.
Right. And everybody else at his work was already sick because of the zombie apocalypse. So they were counting on him.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to rag on real quick is, does it bother anybody else that David looks simultaneously like Harry Potter and Snape?
That's great.
I'm just saying.
No, but I have questions.
It's a mashup that I have questions.
It was Polyjuice Potion gone wrong.
Fan fiction.
Oh, man. Jeez.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring up like looking at this at different ages, because when this was 2004 when it came out, I was actually in London doing some research, and I saw the posters, and I'm thinking like, holy shit, I should probably go see this movie. But I'm thinking like, oh, it's probably a spoof, because I kept seeing, plays that were spoofs of movies and things that were going on. And I kept seeing the posters at the bus stops and at the London Underground and all these places. And I'm thinking like, well, maybe it's a play, or maybe it's just a parody of something, because Dawn of the Dead, I'm sitting like, well, maybe that's what they're doing here. So I didn't see it until I came home, and I really wish I had seen it there to get kind of the British impression or British reaction of the film in those theaters. But when I came home, I saw it, and I was in college. I was a grad student. I'm still seeing it from younger eyes. And it's that same thing. I saw Pete as an asshole. When I watched the movie this time, I think it's probably been about 4 or 5 years since the last time I've seen it. When I watched it this time, I'm like, these guys are assholes. Like, what the fuck are you doing at 4 o'clock in the morning playing music and shit? And their excuse was, it's Saturday. And my
no,
head,
it's not.
My head exploded, because I'm sitting there with Pete. I'm like, 4 a.m. I was like, well, and Pete's like, no, the fuck it's not. It's Sunday. And I'm thinking to myself, like, that would be me now. If you wake me up and it's for some stupid reason, like I'm playing, like somebody better be dead at 4 o'clock in the morning or dying at 4 o'clock in the morning for you to wake me up. It better not be because you're playing electro. But but their reaction is kind of like, oh yeah, we broke up with Liz. And he's like, and my reaction would have been the same as Pete's. I really don't give a shit. I got to go to work. People are sick. I got to go in, and I've got to go in 4 hours, so I'm going to get no sleep. But yeah, it's you get to see kind of this generational shift, or at least this perspective with respect to maturity, where Pete seems to be getting his stuff together as far as with his career or with his job, to where he's trying to advance. He's got his own plan of how he's going to work things out. Whereas Shaun just kind of seems to be okay with the way things are, which both plans are okay. It's just that you can't have those two plans come up against each other with people. So I can't live with somebody who they're just trying to figure things out and they're going to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and play music or come in late and play music or whatever. If I'm working, 60 hours a week, because we're not going to, one of us is not going to survive.
He got a raw deal, I'm telling you. Shambled into the shower and then died on his feet.
His last thoughts were probably about work.
I bet.
So sad.
Now they also have, I guess throwbacks or nods to other films or Easter eggs or whatever you want to call it. Because one of my favorite parts of the film, aside from the beating of the bar owner to Queen, has to be when Ed and Shaun are on the phone with Shaun's mother and talking about after they've concocted their plan as far as what they're going to do. Ed blurts out or yells out, "We're coming to get you, Barbara." And it's a great nod to Night of the Living Dead, where that infamous scene at the beginning of the film where Barbara's in the cemetery and her boyfriend looks at her and says, "They're coming to get you, Barbara." And you have a few other things in the film that take place in the same, give these nods to these other films.
Yeah, I don't know if you noticed, but Shaun actually works at 4E Electric, a nod to Ken 4E of Dawn of the Dead.
Yep.
And then at one point, I think it's Shaun that says zombie or tries to say zombie. He says, "Don't say that. Say what? The Z word." Yeah, and it's a reference to the word zombie is never uttered. Until Land of the Dead by Dennis Hopper in a Romero movie. But it was sort of like a thing for a while where in Romero zombie flicks, they didn't say zombie.
Right.
I don't know if you guys know this, but Romero was the one person that they wanted to see the film and give them a blessing of sorts. And he watched it alone in a theater with one security guard, according to the interview I read. And he called it an absolute blast. And Edgar Wright, who directed the film, that's like his crowning achievement, to the point that he put Romero's quote on the poster. And it says it's an absolute blast, George Romero. And I can't help but think how fucking cool that would be to have that feeling, that validation from somebody that you clearly really admire.
Mm-hmm.
That would be amazing. Yeah.
And I think, go ahead.
No, I don't. We don't need to put this in.
Well, I was going to ask, what would it be for the two of you? Because I have an idea of who it would be for me. Or at least a couple.
Doug, do you want to answer that?
I think if Del Toro ever said something about one of my books, particularly something like Behold, where I was trying to evoke some of his darkness and wonder, my aesthetic is really influenced by his films and his writings and just his approach to creativity. And so if I could ever get his spotlight to shine on me, that would be really cool.
Nice. Mine would be editor Doug Murano. I really want him to like my mine would probably be James Wan or Lee Wan-el. I'm a huge Saw freak, and I just love everything else they've done. Like Invisible Man, Lee Wan-el's script just blows it out of the fucking water, and it's so nuanced and great, and I just really identify with everything he does. So those are probably my two. Don?
All right. There are three that I would probably do. It would have been George Romero, but obviously that's not possible. I don't know. Science is advancing. I would also go with Guillermo del Toro. And as far as the living people, Guillermo del Toro, Jordan Peele, or just for the punch that's needed for it, Samuel L. Jackson, just to see something like that movie's motherfucking good. I would just need that as far as this this is the best motherfucking thing I've seen.
Like, you know that you would be completely happy if he was like, that was a waste of my motherfucking time. Like, you'd still be like,
did you see what
Samuel L.
Jackson
said?
Put it on my grave.
That is a great epitaph for your grave. That was a waste of my motherfucking time. So yeah, let's wrap this up. Doug, tell us a bit about the new book that's out and whatever else you want to tell us. And where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, the latest anthology, co-edited with fellow Bram Stoker Award winner Michael Bailey, is called Miscreations, Gods, Monstrosities, and Other Horrors. And it really takes off from the Frankenstein myth, asks the questions, what happens when we make monsters? What happens when we make monsters of ourselves? It's got a lineup that I'm really, really proud of. It's got Josh Mallerman, Victor Laval, Brian Hodge, Theodora Goss, Nadia Bulkin, Alma Katsu, who wrote both The Hunger and The Deep, provided an outstanding foreword for it. And so we're really proud of that. And it's fully illustrated by our cover artist, Hag Cult. So, and also it's going to be on sale. So I think on the day that this podcast goes live, so June 15th, 2020, it'll be 99 cents on Kindle through Amazon for the next 2 weeks. So we're hoping to move a lot of Kindle copies during that time. And I hope that you can listen to this and then go check it out. But yeah, that's kind of what I've got going on from a new release standpoint. You can find me on social media, on Twitter at Murano Fiction, and also on Instagram at Murano Fiction.
Awesome. And I just realized June 15th. Happy birthday, Don.
Yay.
Yay. Happy birthday, Don. The 17th is my birthday. So, you know.
Well, happy birthday, Doug.
It's going to be a big week of celebration.
It is going to be so many people celebrating the first time that they laid in someone else's bed crying naked. What a great. What, is that not what birthdays are?
What?
I didn't know.
Well, I suppose, yeah, that's.
I'm going to have to let my parents know of that one. Like, so what happened?
All right. Well, on that note, Doug, thank you for coming on the show.
Yes,
I had a great time, man.
Oh, man. Thank you guys both for having me, and thanks for the wonderful conversation. Good luck with the podcast, and I'd love to do it again sometime.
Excellent.
Well, you're welcome to.
Cool, man. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So until next time, as always, I am James Sabata.
And I am Don Guillory.
And we'll see you next week here on the Necronama.com.